It was supposed to be just another regular day, a quiet one at home while I recovered from my broken leg. I had no idea that my sister's visit would completely change the course of the week. A week that was supposed to be about rest and healing quickly turned into a battle of wills, a family drama, and an experience that tested my patience, boundaries, and the strength of my relationship with my sister. And it all started when she asked me to babysit my nephew, despite the fact that I could barely get around on crutches. It all started when I broke my leg. I wasn't expecting it to happen, but life has a funny way of throwing curveballs. One minute, I was walking down the stairs, the next, I was sprawled on the floor, my leg throbbing in pain. I immediately knew something was seriously wrong. The doctor confirmed it. I had a fractured leg that would keep me off my feet for weeks. At first, I tried to stay positive. A few weeks of rest at home didn't sound too bad. I had time to relax, catch up on shows, read, and just take a break from my busy life. I was ready to accept that this injury was a bump in the road, a temporary setback. What I didn't expect was that this injury would throw me into a whirlwind of family drama, starting with my sister's unexpected request. The phone rang, and it was my sister. "Hey, can you watch the baby tomorrow? I've got a dentist appointment, and I really need someone to take care of him," she asked casually. I glanced down at my leg, still in a cast, the crutches leaning against the wall. "I can't," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "I've got a broken leg, and I'm barely able to move around, let alone chase a toddler." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. "Come on, it'll just be for a couple of hours. You're just sitting at home doing nothing anyway. I don't know what else to do." I felt my frustration rising. She wasn't taking my injury seriously. "I'm really sorry, but I can't. I need to rest and heal." Her voice grew slightly annoyed. "It's just a couple of hours. Please, I really need your help." I took a deep breath. "I can't do it. I'm not ready to be running around after him." The call ended with her not sounding very happy, but I thought that would be the end of it. Little did I know, I was about to face a lot more than just physical pain. The next day, I was finally starting to get a bit of rest. My leg was propped up, wrapped in an ice pack, and I was catching up on some much-needed sleep. The quiet of the house was a relief, and I could finally focus on healing. That was when the doorbell rang. I groaned, barely able to get up and maneuver on crutches. With a sigh, I hobbled toward the door, wondering who it could be. When I opened it, I was met with a sight that made my heart sink. My sister was standing there, holding my nephew by the hand. "What are you doing here?" I asked, confusion creeping into my voice. Without a word, she just stepped inside, almost as if she hadn't heard me at all. She set down my nephew's diaper bag and looked up at me. "I'll be gone for a few hours," she said matter-of-factly. "You'll watch him, right?" My eyes widened in disbelief. "Wait, what? You're leaving him here with me? I told you I couldn't babysit." She gave me a tight smile, the kind that suggested she had already made up her mind. "It'll be fine. You can manage. You're at home, right? You'll just sit on the couch with him." Before I could protest any further, she turned and walked out, leaving me standing there, my crutches slipping as I tried to hold onto the doorframe. I stood there for a moment, stunned. This couldn't be happening. Had she really just dropped off my nephew without even asking if I was okay with it? I hadn't even had a chance to argue. And now, here I was, with a child to care for when I could barely take care of myself. I took a deep breath, looking down at my nephew, who was happily oblivious to the situation. He was a sweet kid, but his energy was enough to tire anyone out, let alone someone with a broken leg. I wasn't even sure how I would manage to get through the next few hours. I sat down on the couch, trying to position myself comfortably with my legs stretched out. "Okay, little guy," I muttered under my breath. "Let's see how this goes." My nephew grinned, grabbed my crutches, and began to pull on them like they were a new toy. I winced, feeling a sharp pain in my leg as I struggled to maintain balance. This wasn't going to be easy. As the hours ticked by, it became clear that this was more than I had signed up for. My patience wore thin. I couldn't keep up with his antics, and every time he tried to climb over me or yank at my crutches, my frustration built. I began to feel the weight of my sister's decision. Why had she done this? Why hadn't she respected my request for space? And why was I the one left to deal with the consequences of her lack of consideration? As the hours passed, things only seemed to get more chaotic. My nephew, full of energy and mischief, didn't stop moving for a second. He was running around the house, pulling on everything in sight, trying to climb the furniture, and laughing as if nothing was out of the ordinary. Meanwhile, I sat there on the couch, cradling my injured leg, feeling more and more overwhelmed. The pain from my broken leg was starting to intensify. I couldn't shift positions on the couch without a sharp jab of discomfort. And yet, there I was, trying to keep my nephew entertained, even though every movement was agony. He grabbed my crutches again, trying to tug them away from me as though they were his toys. I gently pulled them back, only to feel a wave of dizziness from the pain. "Please, just sit still for a minute," I muttered, my voice strained as I tried to stay calm. But my nephew wasn't hearing me. His little feet pitter-pattered across the floor, and his high-pitched giggle echoed through the house. I was exhausted, and I was barely managing to stay upright. As he dashed toward the kitchen, I could only watch in horror as he reached for a cabinet and began pulling things out, scattering them all over the floor. The house, which had once been quiet and peaceful, was now a disaster zone. It felt like every minute was dragging on forever. I was trapped, unable to stop him from getting into things, and the pain in my leg was making it even harder to move. My frustration was building, but I had no way of expressing it. "Hey, no, don't do that." I called out, but he didn't listen. My voice was getting more desperate, but I was also getting more tired. By the time I managed to get up and limp over to him, he had already climbed onto the kitchen table, knocking over a glass of water in the process. The sound of the glass shattering was like the final straw. I felt my blood pressure rise. I had never felt this trapped before. My frustration reached a boiling point, but I didn't want to yell at him. He was just a kid, after all, but it was so hard to maintain my composure with the pain in my leg and the complete lack of support from my sister. It wasn't just the physical exhaustion that was wearing me down. It was the emotional toll as well. I had been asking my sister for some understanding, some empathy. I needed her to acknowledge that I was struggling and couldn't be the go-to person for everything. Yet, here I was, dealing with her son alone because she had decided I was the only one available. I kept thinking about how little regard she seemed to have for my situation. She had dropped him off without even asking if I was okay with it. She knew I was recovering from a broken leg, and still, she assumed I would be fine with babysitting. I couldn't understand why she didn't respect my needs. Finally, I was able to scoop my nephew off the table and gently put him on the ground, trying to redirect his attention toward a toy that might keep him occupied. I sat back down on the couch, my leg throbbing more intensely now, and I let out a long breath. This was becoming too much. I needed to tell her how I felt, but I also knew that confrontation with my sister wasn't going to be easy. She wouldn't see it the way I did. She never did. And as I sat there, watching my nephew continue to play around me, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't going to be the last time our differences came to a head. The chaos that had unfolded over the last few hours was beginning to take its toll on me. My leg was killing me, my patience was running thin, and my nephew was showing no signs of slowing down. He was a whirlwind, moving from one thing to another, completely oblivious to the fact that I could barely keep up. Each time I tried to settle him down, he would move on to something else, throwing toys, climbing the couch, or even trying to open drawers and cabinets. The frustration bubbled up inside me. I had tried to be patient. I had tried to make the best of the situation. But at this point, I felt completely defeated. I couldn't understand why my sister had thought this was a good idea. How had she expected me to babysit him when I could barely walk? As the hours dragged on, I kept checking the time, hoping she would be back soon. The minutes felt like hours, and I felt myself slipping further into irritation. I wasn't used to feeling so helpless, and the combination of physical pain and emotional exhaustion was starting to break me. Finally, I heard the sound of the front door opening. I breathed a sigh of relief, but it was short-lived. My sister walked in, smiling as though everything had gone perfectly. "Hey, how's everything going?" she asked casually, not even bothering to look around at the mess my nephew had created. I didn't even bother with a greeting. "You can't be serious," I snapped, the frustration in my voice more evident than I'd meant. "This is insane. I told you I couldn't babysit, and yet you just dropped him off like it was nothing." She froze, her smile fading. "What are you talking about? He's fine. You just need to take a breath." "No," I exploded, unable to hold back anymore. "You didn't listen to me. You didn't care that I have a broken leg. You just assumed I could handle it, and look at what happened. I'm exhausted, and my leg feels like it's going to give out any second." My sister's expression shifted from confusion to annoyance. "I don't get why you're making such a big deal out of this. It's just a couple of hours. I didn't think it would be this hard for you. You didn't think it would be hard for me?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You really thought I'd be fine? You don't even understand how much pain I'm in. And you just left him here without even asking." She didn't say anything for a moment, and I could see her starting to get defensive. "Well, I had no choice. I needed help, and you were the only one available. You should have just sucked it up." I stood there, staring at her, feeling a sense of betrayal wash over me. How could she say that? How could she be so dismissive of my feelings, my pain? This wasn't just a small inconvenience. This was my health, my well-being. I had told her time and again that I wasn't able to help, and yet she had ignored all of that. The room was filled with tension, and my frustration had reached its peak. "I'm not a babysitter," I finally said, my voice cold. "I'm your sister, and I need you to understand that. I need support, not more stress. But instead, I've been left here with a broken leg and no choice but to take care of your son." She opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't wait for her reply. I turned and limped back to the couch, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't believe this was happening. How had it come to this? My sister stood there for a moment, probably trying to process what I had said, but I didn't care anymore. I was done trying to justify myself. This wasn't just about babysitting, it was about respect. I needed to make it clear that I couldn't keep putting myself last for the sake of everyone else. But the real question lingered in my mind. Would my sister ever understand? Would she ever acknowledge how much her actions had hurt me? The silence that followed my outburst felt deafening. My sister didn't speak for what felt like an eternity, but I could feel the weight of the moment hanging in the air. She was processing what I had said, but it was clear that she wasn't quite ready to accept it. I had never raised my voice like that before, especially not to her, but my patience had finally run dry. She glanced at my nephew, who was still happily playing with his toys, completely unaware of the tension that had just erupted. Then, she slowly turned her gaze back to me. I didn't mean to upset you, she said quietly, her tone softer than before. I was just desperate for help. I thought you could handle it. Desperate for help? I echoed, incredulous. You didn't even ask if I was okay with it. You just dropped him off, assuming I could handle it. It's not just about babysitting, it's about respect. I told you I wasn't able to do this. Her eyes softened, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of understanding. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by the familiar defensive tone that I had come to expect from her. I didn't think you'd be this upset, she muttered. I thought you'd just do it for me. You always do. I couldn't help but feel a pang of hurt at her words. She was right. Up until now, I had always dropped everything to help her. But this time was different. This time, I had my own needs, my own limitations, and I couldn't just ignore them anymore. I can't always be there for you, not like this, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I've been there for you so many times before, but I need you to start respecting my boundaries. There was a long pause. My sister just stood there, staring at the floor, probably trying to think of a response that wouldn't make things worse. But the damage had been done. We had reached an impasse. I'm sorry, she finally said, but it didn't feel like enough. It didn't feel like the kind of apology that acknowledged the full extent of her actions. It felt more like a quick fix, something to end the conversation. But I wasn't ready to let it go. Not yet. You're sorry, I repeated, my voice thick with emotion. But do you understand why I'm upset? This isn't just about me being angry. It's about how you've been treating me. You think it's okay to ask me for favors without considering what I'm going through, and that's not okay anymore. She looked up at me then, her face a mixture of guilt and frustration. I didn't mean to take you for granted. I thought you'd always be there, you know? I didn't realize how much you've been dealing with on your own. That was the first time she had really acknowledged my feelings, and for a brief moment, I felt a small sense of relief. Maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to understand. But that didn't mean I was ready to forgive everything just yet. I need time, I said quietly. Time to heal, time to process this. And I need you to respect that. I can't keep putting myself last for everyone else. She nodded slowly, her expression softening. Okay, I get it. I'm sorry for not listening to you. I'll try to do better. It wasn't the perfect resolution, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had stood up for myself in a way that mattered. The tension in the room finally began to ease, and as my sister left to pick up her son, I was left alone with my thoughts. The guilt that had been building inside me since she left him here was finally starting to fade. I had done what I needed to do. I had set boundaries, and I had made it clear that I wasn't going to let anyone walk over me anymore. But the hardest part wasn't over. I still had to rebuild my relationship with my sister, one that had become strained by this incident. I didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally taking control of my own life. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And sometimes that's all we can ask for. The days after the incident felt like a slow, drawn-out recovery. Physically, my leg was still in pain, though it was starting to heal. The emotional wounds, however, weren't as easy to fix. I had stood up for myself, and while my sister had apologized, things weren't magically better. It was clear that it would take more than just one conversation to fix the rift that had formed between us. I spent the next few days alone in my apartment, reflecting on everything that had happened. My leg kept me grounded, literally, as I spent most of my time either resting or figuring out ways to pass the time. But my mind kept circling back to the same question. Why had my sister treated me like that? Why hadn't she respected my boundaries sooner? I had always been the one to give, to help, to take on responsibility. But this time, I had asked for something in return, something simple, consideration. And instead of that, I had been met with disregard. It wasn't just about babysitting. It was about how little she seemed to value my needs and feelings. As the days passed, I started to take small steps toward finding peace with the situation. I called a few close friends, seeking their advice and support. They listened patiently as I vented my frustrations, reminding me that I had every right to be upset. They also pointed out that it was important to allow myself to heal, both physically and emotionally, without rushing into forgiveness. One afternoon, I finally picked up my phone and decided to text my sister. I had been avoiding her calls and messages, not because I was angry, but because I wasn't sure what to say. But I knew I couldn't avoid her forever. It was time to talk again. The message I sent was simple. We need to talk. I don't want things to be like this between us. It didn't take long for her to respond. I know. I'm sorry for everything. Can we meet up? I agreed, and we set a time for later that week. As the day of our meeting approached, I felt a mix of emotions, nervousness, uncertainty, but also a glimmer of hope that maybe this conversation would finally give us both the closure we needed. The day we met was surprisingly calm. We met at a coffee shop, a neutral ground that made the conversation feel less confrontational. When I arrived, my sister was already sitting at a table, looking slightly uncomfortable but determined. Hey, she greeted me, her tone more subdued than usual. Hey, I replied, sitting down across from her. The tension between us was palpable, but we both knew this was the first step in trying to repair our relationship. We exchanged a few pleasantries before the conversation turned serious. she started, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it before. I've been thinking a lot about what happened. I know I messed up and I'm sorry. I shouldn't have ignored your boundaries, and I shouldn't have put so much on you when I knew you were struggling. I listened quietly, giving her the space to express herself. It was hard to stay completely neutral, especially after everything that had happened, but I knew this conversation was important. If we were going to move forward, I needed to listen as much as I spoke. I get that you needed help, I said slowly, but I wasn't in a place to give it. I needed you to understand that, and I needed you to respect my limits. I can't keep doing everything for everyone, and I can't keep ignoring my own needs. I understand that now, she said, her voice shaking slightly. I was so caught up in my own stuff that I didn't even think about how much you were carrying. I'm really sorry for putting you in that position. There was sincerity in her words, and for the first time since everything happened, I felt like she truly understood. It wasn't just an apology to smooth things over. It was a genuine acknowledgement of what she had done wrong. I took a deep breath and nodded. I'm not saying I can forgive everything right away, but I want us to be okay. I don't want this hanging over us. I don't want that either, she agreed, looking relieved. I'll do better. I promise. It wasn't the easiest conversation I had ever had, but it was a necessary one. It was the start of a healing process that would take time, but at least we were both willing to put in the effort. As I left the coffee shop that day, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Things weren't perfect, and the road ahead would take time, but I had done what I needed to do. I had set boundaries, I had spoken my truth, and most importantly, I had given myself the space to heal. It wasn't just about my sister anymore. It was about me, about learning to prioritize myself and my needs. That was something I had neglected for far too long, and now I was finally taking steps to change that. The next few weeks weren't without their challenges, but slowly, my sister and I started rebuilding. We learned to communicate better, to respect each other's boundaries, and to support each other without taking one another for granted. It wasn't perfect, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own life again. And that was enough. The weeks following our conversation were a period of cautious optimism. My sister and I were still figuring things out, but there was a noticeable shift in our dynamic. We weren't back to where we had been before everything happened, but we were slowly making progress. The most important thing was that we were communicating more openly, something we hadn't done enough of in the past. I continued focusing on my own healing. With my legs slowly improving, I was able to resume some of my regular activities. But what I hadn't anticipated was how much I would start to focus on myself in ways I hadn't before. I spent more time doing things that made me happy, reading, working on projects that I'd put off, and most importantly, learning how to set clearer boundaries with everyone in my life, not just my sister. It wasn't easy. There were days when I still felt the weight of past resentments, moments when I wondered if I had done the right thing by standing my ground. But as I reflected on those moments, I realized that setting boundaries was never about rejecting people. It was about protecting myself. One Saturday afternoon, my sister called me. We hadn't seen each other much in the past few weeks, but we'd kept in touch regularly through text. Hey, she said, sounding a little nervous. Can we talk? I wanted to apologize again, and I've been thinking about how I can be more supportive. I smiled, even though she couldn't see me. It was the first time in a while that I had felt like she was genuinely putting in the effort. Of course. Let's meet up. We agreed to meet at a local park. It was one of those perfect spring days with the sun shining and the air just cool enough to enjoy a long walk. When I arrived, my sister was sitting on a bench, waiting for me. She stood as soon as she saw me, her expression sincere. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, she began, looking a little unsure but determined. I know I've asked too much of you in the past, and I didn't give you the space to be yourself. I'm really sorry. I nodded, appreciating her honesty. Thank you. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, but it was the way you treated my feelings that really upset me. I needed you to understand my limits. I do now, she said, her voice soft. And I'm going to try harder to respect them. You're not just my sister. You're your own person, and I need to support that. We sat on the bench together, talking for hours. It was the first time in a long time that we had just talked, without any tension or unspoken frustrations. We laughed, we cried, and we both admitted that we had a lot of work to do to rebuild our relationship. But for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were truly hearing each other. As the weeks turned into months, things between us gradually improved. There were still moments of tension, especially when old habits tried to creep in. But we were both more conscious of how we treated each other. I learned to communicate my boundaries clearly and firmly, and my sister became more aware of the importance of not overburdening me. One evening, as we sat together, chatting over a cup of coffee, I realized how far we had come. We weren't perfect, and we still had our disagreements, but we had learned to navigate them with respect and understanding. I'm proud of us, I said, smiling at her. We've come a long way. She smiled back, a hint of gratitude in her eyes. Yeah, we have. And I'm grateful you gave me the chance to make things right. That moment, more than anything, reminded me of the importance of setting boundaries and standing up for myself. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And while the road had been bumpy, it had led to a place where my relationship with my sister was stronger than it had ever been before. It wasn't just about healing physically anymore. It was about healing emotionally, too. I had learned that taking care of myself wasn't selfish, it was essential. And as I looked back on everything that had happened, I realized that it had been a necessary journey. One that had taught me how to say no without guilt, how to set boundaries without feeling like I was abandoning the people I loved. And as for my sister, I knew we still had a lot of work to do. But we were in it together now. And that made all the difference. As time passed, my life slowly returned to normal. My leg healed, though it still ached occasionally, a reminder of how far I had come. But more importantly, my emotional well-being was gradually recovering too. I had learned to be more assertive, to set boundaries, and to prioritize myself. It wasn't always easy, but it was necessary. I had reclaimed my power, something I hadn't realized I had been giving away for so long. But the real challenge was still with my sister. Yes, we had made progress, but there were times when old patterns would resurface, and we would slip back into our familiar dynamic, her asking for more than I could give, and me reluctantly agreeing. We had to be vigilant in maintaining the boundaries we had set, which required constant communication. One Saturday, my sister called me up and asked if we could talk. There was an urgency in her voice that immediately got my attention. "Sure," I said, curious. "What's up?" She sounded apologetic, but also a little nervous. "I've been thinking a lot about what we've been through, and I feel like I owe you something. I know I've asked a lot from you, and I haven't always been considerate. I just wanted to say I'm sorry again. And this time I really mean it." I could hear the sincerity in her voice, but at the same time, I had to be cautious. "I appreciate that," I replied. "But words are one thing. What I need to see are actions." "I know," she said quickly. "That's why I've been thinking. I want to make it right. I've been working on a plan to help out more, to respect your space. I don't want to be someone who just takes from you anymore." That surprised me. I hadn't expected her to acknowledge it so clearly or to take proactive steps to show she had learned from our situation. "Okay," I said slowly. "I'm listening." She explained that she had taken on a new project at work and would be working fewer hours, which meant she'd have more time to help around the house and take care of her son without relying on me so much. "I want you to feel like you can rely on me too," she said. "I've been thinking about how I can be there for you, not just when it's convenient for me." It felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. We had both been in survival mode for so long, but this conversation felt like a new chapter for us. It wasn't about grand gestures or trying to fix everything overnight. It was about understanding, about making small but meaningful changes. The days after that conversation felt different. My sister started keeping her word, offering help when I needed it and making sure not to push my boundaries. There were moments when I was still wary, when I felt the old tension creeping back, but I reminded myself that healing takes time. It wasn't about perfection, it was about progress. One evening, a few weeks after our talk, my sister came over to my place, and we decided to spend the evening just hanging out. We ordered takeout, watched some old movies, and laughed together like we hadn't done in ages. It felt normal again, like the old us, but with a new layer of understanding between us. "I'm glad we're doing this," I said, sitting back and sipping my drink. "Me too," she agreed, looking relaxed for the first time in a while. "I guess I just needed to realize that being family doesn't mean I get to take advantage of you. I've got to be more aware of what you need too." "I've learned that too," I said with a smile. "It's not just about what I can do for you, it's about us finding a balance." And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we had finally reached that balance. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. We had both made mistakes, but we were willing to grow from them. Things weren't perfect, and there were still moments when we disagreed, but the foundation of respect and understanding we were building was stronger than ever. It wasn't just about me setting boundaries. It was about my sister learning how to respect them. It was about both of us recognizing that family wasn't about doing everything for each other. It was about supporting each other in healthy, sustainable ways. As the months went by, our relationship grew stronger. It wasn't just the occasional help or gesture that made it stronger. It was the consistent effort to communicate and listen, to recognize each other's needs, and to give each other the space to grow. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own life, not just responding to the demands of others. And that was a freedom I had never realized I needed until now. Looking back, I realized that this experience had taught me far more than just how to deal with my sister's demands. It had taught me about self-respect, about the importance of boundaries, and about the delicate balance between helping others and helping myself. It had taught me that it was okay to say no when I needed to, and that by doing so, I wasn't rejecting people, I was simply taking care of myself. And in the end, I had learned the most important lesson of all, that relationships, whether with family, friends, or anyone else, are healthiest when both people are willing to put in the effort, to listen, and to grow together. And that's a journey I was ready to continue, one step at a time. As much as I had tried to move forward, life had a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expected them. Just when I thought things were going well with my sister, something happened that would test everything I had learned about boundaries, forgiveness, and what it really meant to move on. It started with a simple text from my sister one evening. "Can we talk?" she wrote, sounding a little off. "It's about something that's been bothering me." I was caught off guard. Things had been relatively smooth between us lately, so I wondered what could have possibly happened to cause a change. Still, I replied, "Sure. What's going on?" When we met up the next day, I could tell she had been thinking deeply about something. She looked uncomfortable as she sat down in front of me, her hands fidgeting with her coffee cup. I've been feeling a little guilty lately, she started, looking down at her cup instead of meeting my eyes. I've realized that I've been relying on you a lot, more than I should have. Even after everything we talked about, I still find myself asking you for help with things I shouldn't be burdening you with. I blinked, trying to process what she was saying. I don't understand, I said cautiously. I thought we were both on the same page about respecting each other's space and boundaries. We were, she replied, her voice shaky. But I still find myself asking for help when I should be taking care of things on my own. I don't want to keep using you as a safety net, and I'm afraid that's what I've been doing. I listened, trying to grasp the full extent of what she was saying. It was a confession that came from a place of guilt and self-awareness, but it also stirred something inside me. Was she truly trying to change, or was this just another cycle of asking too much from me? I know it's been hard for both of us, she continued, eyes welling up. But I don't want to hurt you anymore. I've been feeling like I'm letting you down, and I'm so sorry for that. I took a deep breath. It wasn't easy to hear, but I could see how much this was weighing on her. She had been holding herself accountable, and that was something I hadn't expected from her. The question was, could I believe her? And more importantly, could I trust myself not to slip back into the same patterns? After some quiet moments, I spoke up. I appreciate you being honest with me, I said, choosing my words carefully. But we've been down this road before. I've told you how important it is for me to have my space, and I don't want to feel like I'm constantly pulled back into a place where I'm doing too much for you. She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. I know. I really do get it now. And I'm sorry. I don't want to take advantage of you again. I just don't know how to let go of relying on you. I understood. She wasn't coming from a place of malice. She was just overwhelmed, unsure of how to navigate life without leaning on me. But I also knew that it wasn't my responsibility to fix her problems or to always be there when she needed me. We sat there for a while, the silence between us filled with unspoken understanding. It was a moment of reckoning, not just for her, but for me as well. I realized that despite everything I had learned about boundaries, I still had to actively enforce them. I couldn't let her fall back into old patterns of dependence, and I couldn't allow myself to slip into the role of fixer again. I think it's important that we both take some time to figure out what we need from each other, I said finally, my voice calm but firm. It's not just about you changing, it's about both of us adjusting to healthier dynamics. We can't keep doing the same things and expecting different results. She nodded, wiping her eyes. You're right. I'll work on it, I promise. I just don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose you either, I replied, giving her a soft smile. But we have to grow, not just together, but individually too. We can't keep relying on each other in the same ways we always have. It's time to evolve. The rest of the conversation was less about apologies and more about plans. How we could work together to build a new, healthier relationship. My sister vowed to start seeking support from others when she needed it, and I promised to be there when I could, but never at the expense of my own well-being. As we parted ways, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. This wasn't an easy path, and I knew that our journey wouldn't always be smooth. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the same page, both of us willing to make the necessary changes. In the weeks that followed, my sister stuck to her word. She started reaching out to friends and other family members when she needed help, and while I still supported her, I didn't let her take advantage of my time or energy. I focused on my own growth as well, exploring new interests, taking time for myself, and nurturing the friendships that had always been there for me. And as for my sister, I could see the positive changes in her. She was becoming more self-sufficient, more confident, and more willing to take responsibility for her own life. It wasn't easy, but the fact that she was trying meant the world to me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was seeing her for who she truly was, a person who was learning, growing, and evolving. And that was all I could ever ask for. Months passed, and our relationship continued to evolve in ways I hadn't expected. Looking back on everything, it felt surreal how far we had come. From the days of frustration and resentment to now, where things were slowly falling into place. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't always smooth sailing, but it was real, and that was enough. One evening, as I sat on the couch catching up on a book, I got a text from my sister. It wasn't a big deal or anything urgent, just a simple, "How are you doing? Just checking in." I smiled at the text. It was a small thing, but it meant a lot. Over time, we had both learned to give each other space without feeling guilty, and more importantly, to check in, not because we had to, but because we genuinely cared. I replied, "I'm good. Just reading. How about you?" She texted back almost immediately. "I'm great, actually. I wanted to tell you something." My heart raced a little. It was funny how after all this time, she still had the power to make me feel anxious, even in the best of ways. "What's going on?" I typed back. She didn't text right away, which made me wonder if she was thinking carefully about how to say whatever was on her mind. Then the message came. "I got a promotion at work. It's been a long time coming, and I know I wouldn't have been able to do it without the space to grow. The space you gave me. I just wanted to thank you." I read the message a few times, letting it sink in. I wasn't sure if she fully understood how much her words meant to me, but I could tell she was being sincere. She had come a long way, And this wasn't just a victory for her. It was a victory for both of us. It was proof that the changes we had made weren't just temporary. They were real, lasting changes. I immediately typed, "That's amazing. I'm so proud of you. You've worked hard for this, and you deserve it." She responded, "I know I've made mistakes in the past, but I want you to know that I'm doing my best to be the person you need me to be, and the person I need to be for myself. I'm sorry if I've hurt you in the past. I want you to know that I'm learning and growing every day." It wasn't easy to hear the apology again, but this time, it felt different. This time I knew it was real. It wasn't just words, it was backed up by actions, by real change. I had seen it in her, and now she was seeing it in herself. We were no longer stuck in the same cycle. We had both moved forward. "I know you are," I replied, my heart a little lighter. "And I'm proud of the person you've become." That night, we didn't talk for too long, but it felt like we didn't need to. There was a sense of peace between us that had taken years to build. The road had been tough, but every step had been worth it. We had learned not only about each other, but also about ourselves. As the months turned into years, the dynamic between my sister and me continued to grow. We still had our moments, of course. No relationship is perfect, but we had learned to communicate, to respect each other's boundaries, and to support each other in ways that didn't feel like burdens. When I look back on that time when I broke my leg and had to make the decision to put my foot down, I realized that it was one of the most pivotal moments of my life. It wasn't just about my leg, it was about reclaiming my life, my space, and my independence. It was about learning to say no without feeling guilty, and about teaching the people around me how to respect that. And in the end, it wasn't just my sister who benefited from that lesson. It was me too. I learned that boundaries weren't a sign of weakness or selfishness. They were a form of self-care, a way of making sure that I was able to give to others without losing myself in the process. Looking at where we are now, I couldn't have asked for anything more. I had found balance. I had found peace. And above all, I had found a way to love and support my family without losing myself in the process. And for that, I was incredibly grateful. The story may have started with a broken leg and a difficult decision, but in the end, it had been about so much more than that. It had been about growth, change, and most importantly, about learning to live life on my own terms. And now, as I sat in my quiet home, knowing that I had done the work to heal, I couldn't help but smile. Because sometimes, the hardest decisions are the ones that lead to the most rewarding outcomes.